everybody. Welcome to Confidential Conversations. This one is exciting and we're flying by the seat of our pants because of all of the insanity that has just gone on with the Murdaugh murders. And oh my gosh, I'm getting ready to jump out of my seat because I am so excited to have Kelly Nicholson. She is the founder of the original Murdaughs in the Low. I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to say it again. I'm so excited. I'm actually going to get this wrong. Founder of the original Murdaugh in the Lowcountry Facebook page. If you've watched this, been part of it, all of their blogs, their questions, their posts, amazing. All right, so I have to stop talking because I really need to give this woman some time to speak. Kelly, please tell everybody who you are, what you do, and how we all ended up in this circle together tonight.
Oh, wow. So yes, I'm Kelly Nicholson, and I lived in South Carolina for 12 years and moved to Florida about 10 years ago. But it's a small state, and a lot of people don't realize it, but the entire state has the same population as Miami-Dade County, just to give people perspective. So there's a lot more land than people in South Carolina. And I lived in Columbia. So Columbia is the capital. It's a small state. You're going to know people. And when I heard about this case, I'd heard about each part of it as it happened, but it really was around the Labor Day weekend, the roadside shooting. That's when I got drawn in and I really started looking at it deeper. And I realized the story deeply connected with me because one of my dear friends back in South Carolina had a brother that was actually a lot like Paul, a very, very similar dynamic in many ways. So it really connected to my heart and my personal interest because I felt like finally we're seeing a situation where it looks like these families are going to have some consequences for what they've done with their children, which is not given these elite families allow their children never to have any consequences. And it breaks my heart because it not only ruins that child's life, but then it tends to end up ruining other people's lives. And often the child that they have ends up dead. And in both of these situations, the child of the enabling parent ends up dead because of what the parent did, you know? So it deeply connected with me. I went on Facebook looking for groups to join because I wanted to talk about it. And I'm down here in Florida and I know a lot of people who know people that are involved in this, people who knew Alex.
Just saying.
Yeah. I knew people who knew Alex, who hunted on Moselle with him. Several people actually that knew them. So, well, maybe I should create my own. And I did. And what was unique about my group was that we didn't allow hate speech or derogatory, defamatory statements towards the victims or the advocates of the victims. And that was really important to me because a lot of these groups were coming out with really extreme misinformation and blaming the victims. Like they were putting things out trying to say the kids were at fault. Horrible things. Other things too, like a group that Sandy Smith was in, they were posting pictures that she made it clear she didn't want those pictures of her child posted. Well, I think you should honor that. There's times that you do what, put some of these pictures out, but I mean, in something like a Facebook group, it wasn't necessary. So very quickly, we started noticing people joining the group that were family members of the victims. Some of them were the victims themselves, and I won't say which ones, but lots of key people. And a big one was at the time, Mandy Matney was polarized with a lot of different groups. And we were like, I'm a huge advocate. I adore what she's done. I think her work has really made this case come to light. I don't think it would have even gotten to this point had she not been relentless and not letting it go. I mean, she just wouldn't.
She was a ground.
Not let it go. And I'm really happy that we were able to work with her as long as we did. And we became friends with FITSNews, which, Mandy was with FITSNews, and they were really the groundbreakers in bringing this to the public and getting people upset and forcing SLED and the investigation to happen. But
when you mentioned FITSNews, so people who are watching this have no idea what that is. If you're not familiar, FITSNews is very, very local, smaller at the time news organization
Very local.
located in South Carolina. So
it actually really was just a blog.
Yeah.
It started off as a blog type news.
Yeah. So FITSNews is there. They're the local, smaller at the time organization that started paying attention to this. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
yes. No, yeah. And FITSNews has actually been there for a long time. It's funny. A lot of us who've really like become a family within the group, I find a lot of people really haven't paid attention to FITSNews for very long, but I did because it has a deep history within South Carolina politics and also drama. Like, we'll leave it there. But yeah, so we became friends with FITSNews, and I started seeing some of these people on Facebook coming up with these mind-blowing theories that look to be accurate very, very early on, like finding properties that were owned by the Murdaughs. And one of these people, and she went by a false name, and I'm fine with that. She wanted her privacy, but it really seemed as though she was like 10 to 20 steps ahead of what was coming out in all of the news at the time. So I contacted Will and said, I've got a girl. I think she's doing really great research. Maybe you should check in with her. And she did end up being that great. And she eventually was working with who most of us know, Jennifer Reed Wood, who's also an administrator in my group. She's absolutely fantastic. And she'd already been working with Will. So yeah, my group became unique in that we kept it small intentionally. Like, we're not the biggest group, but we try to maintain quality. So if you're in our group, you're not seeing double posts, and it was a nice place to be. Yeah, here we are a year and a half later.
You've done a great job. And
thank you.
Through a whole world outside of the Murdaughs is where we ended up connecting, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
All I can say is I'm grateful. So now here we are. You introduced me to this case.
Yeah.
I just dove in hook, line, and sinker. And originally, if you remember, you wanted me to look in the Satterfield portion of the case. And as I started researching, I said, oh, no. There's this boy, Stephen. And
yeah,
that is something I need to dive into. And through that, our connection with FITSNews. And then I've actually gone out to South Carolina and did a preliminary type run through to just get assessed and comfortable and understanding the world out there. And so this is one question. I'm going to go back to what you said. You're from South Carolina. You know that area. You know the Lowcountry. You know how small town it is. I know the level of weight once you get there, especially when you're going into Stephen Smith. And we're going to totally dive into all that. But there's a heaviness of the control of power and the complete separation of humanity there. There's extreme poverty and there are elites. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're almost forgotten and lost because it is so much one side and the other. So when you were there, before all this chaos, was it still the same way, or did it get worse over time?
I think it's always been that way. I think when I first moved there, what you sound like you're describing is something, I think it's similar to what I used to feel. It took me a while to figure out what I was feeling even. And once I learned the history, especially of Columbia, like I just couldn't wrap my brain. I'm like, this place just feels so strange. Why are parts of this city, it still looks like it's in ruin? Like it's like for the capital. And then I used to drive back and forth from here to South Carolina. And I watched an old TV series called North and South with Patrick Swayze. And as I was watching it, it's about the Civil War, I had forgotten that South Carolina was the leader in the secession. It was like the new capital of the Confederacy. And Columbia in particular had pretty much been burnt to the ground. So I, a lot of times, feel like I feel the history of things that have happened there. So when you're there, you may have also even been feeling like the history that is still there in the ground. And you'll see some towns that like don't look very modern. And it's not necessarily because they just wanted to preserve it. A lot of these places in South Carolina were destroyed over like hundreds of years ago. And, by the time I left, they had done so much renovation to Columbia. But the time that I was there, it was still kind of in reconstruction in the early 2000s, I felt like.
When I went
parts of it.
in and walked the streets and walked the town and met with local people who have lived there their entire life, you really truly cannot describe how small it is. And that's going to be later when we're talking. And
you're talking about dirt road areas.
The weight of the power
dynamic
and difference resonates. And what I saw when I was there and noticed immediately is that they both thrive on each other. The elite, I'm not saying bad, but you know who I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
The elite thrive on the poverty that needs them. And those that aren't elite thrive on the connection of the power that's paying attention to them. And there's nothing good that happens there. They're using each other. And it's like a horrible cycle of nothing good's going to happen from this. It's just a circle of using each other. And this is what it leads to: Murdaugh murders. It's been evolving for decades. Am I wrong? Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm misguided. I'm okay with that. But it is truly, each side is using each other. And again, don't send me a bunch of hate mail. I'm not saying everything. I'm just saying there is, this class is using this class for what it needs, and this class is using this class for what it needs. And there's a lot of big old IOUs that come out of that.
Yeah.
And
Southern culture too.
Unfortunately, in the human psyche, there is so much that can be done when I'm speaking about control out of fear. And when you get someone that's not as profitable as you, and you get them out of a ticket, or you get them out of a charge, or you get them out of jail, or you get them not even having to go to jail, there's an IOU there. And if you don't fulfill that, there's a fear. And you build that over decades. Mm-hmm. That's generational fear. People refer to it in the news as the generational success. But what they aren't touching on is there is a buildup of generational fear that
absolutely
families that ran through bloodlines, and trying to get people to speak up about the corruption or the illegalities that were taking place there by people who put fake blue lights on their car and let a badge stick out of their pants is real, is very, very real. And which brings us to, we'll start with what we're all witnessing and watching. And I think that's the only way to then backtrack to, there's a lot more going on here.
Yeah.
So let's dive into what we have all just witnessed over the past several weeks, was the Murdaugh family murder trial. And Alec on trial for allegedly, at the time, brutally and horrifically murdering his wife and son. Now, I'm not going to waste everybody's time talking about what theoretically happened, because we all know what happened. So give me what are your takeaways from the trial? Like, give me all the points that really got to you.
Oh my gosh. I haven't really watched that many trials, I have to admit. I watched the Johnny Depp one earlier this year. That was a lot of fun. And then I watched the parts of the Wakasha one as well. So I was sort of like expecting it. And we had the Parkland because that was local. I was expecting it to be a little more similar. And this was nothing like any of that. I felt like I was watching a movie. And I don't like to talk about things in that way because it makes it seem like it's not as serious as it should be, or like real life, but it really was real life. That was like intensely dramatic. Parts of this trial had a few good men, you can't handle the truth moments. And you've got these men with these Southern accents and oh my gosh. And Mark Tinsley was a trailblazer. And a lot of us who'd been following this case, we hadn't seen much of Mark Tinsley. Like when we went to, we looked into everybody online. Mark Tinsley didn't.
People who are just watching this, Mark Tinsley is the
Mallory Beach
attorney for Mallory Beach from the boat crash that started this downward spiral. I'll give you my theory after, but go ahead.
Yeah. And I'm actually, through our group, I became very good friends with one of her cousins. And yeah, Mark Tinsley, like all of us had kind of tried to look him up online, and there wasn't much of a website to find. I don't know if he had that intentionally, but seeing him in the courtroom, my goodness, like I could make a good 20, 30 clips of one-liners from his testimony. His was fantastic. I do eyelashes for a living, and I've probably made like at least 10 of my clients listen to his entire testimony.
It was remarkable. It was remarkable.
He was so bold and brave. Like, Eric Bland, Gloria was handled before. So Eric Bland came along, and like for a long time, he was our favorite lawyer because he was not afraid to go up against Alex and the Murdaughs and everyone.
Which is
Mark Tinsley wasn't afraid.
Not afraid. It really took.
It took somebody not being afraid.
Generational fear. We needed these people to face them up front, call out the bully in the playground to actually get anywhere with this.
Absolutely.
This entire legal system.
I think what's really commendable and unique about Mark Tinsley is from the South. He is from there. He is invested in the system. I'm sure he's like dialed into the network. Whereas Eric is from Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. I believe he's from Philly. And like, not to get real, but he's Jewish, and we're in the Bible Belt. So most everyone there is Baptist. So, that's another thing that kind of makes him a little bit of he's very much an outsider in many ways. So for Eric, I feel like, he was also very still brave, but he was always an outsider kind of anyways. But with Mark, I think that was actually pretty surprising to see someone from within be willing to stand up and say, hey, no, it's not okay.
No,
it took a lot of courage for both of those guys to do what they did. But yeah, Mark Tinsley really stands out for me. Also, there was Shelley, the caregiver. It took a lot of courage for her to, outright knowing that what she's saying is going to contradict with what Alex said. And
when she paused, did you not feel?
I could feel her fear.
Feel it. I even think I was watching it, or I was standing up, and I think it stopped me dead in my tracks, because you knew she was going to say something.
Yeah.
You saw that. Maybe it's just human nature to understand someone's body language. You're just like, what's about to happen?
And these people were like family to the Murdaughs, like the Murdaughs, their lives get entwined. And so when you're something like a caregiver, you're there probably more than Alex or any of the family members were. She was a part of their family. And also, this is your income.
Yeah.
And
by all accounts, they treated her very well. So there's an appreciation that goes full circle.
Yeah.
She did not want to say what she knew was true, but she did. That takes a lot. I'm not saying.
I think I almost felt nervous for her when she was testifying.
When there was that pause, I think my heart started going, something's happening, like, what is she about to say? And she handled herself beautifully, and she stayed true. She followed her heart, she followed her soul, and she told the truth, which is a lot more than I say for some other people. I
know. Her and Blanca both, and actually even Maggie's sister, I felt one of the most profound moments I felt like for me was when Maggie's sister, she confirmed that Alex did want Maggie to go out there. And he likes to play it as though, oh, I just always wanted her to go out there. No, he asked her to go. He wanted her to go to see his father, supposedly, who was I can't remember who was supposed to be in the hospital, but whatever happened, it got canceled. because he wasn't in the hospital, or so they weren't going to go, but he'd already coaxed her out there. And her sister had told her, yes, I think you should go. And
you knew she didn't, and you saw her in her testimony,
mm,
that guilt, that what if I told her not to go? It was almost
that survivor's guilt.
yeah, message. Like you could hear her thoughts, even though she wasn't saying it.
Yeah.
Just by the way she responded to that answer. I have a sister, and you don't have to have a sister. You could have a brother, you could have a friend. And if you encourage that friend to go do something, and then in the action of doing that, it costs them their lives.
Oh, it's traumatic.
There's guilt in that, even though that had nothing to do with you and what you said. You can't predict somebody's.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
you understood it, and I just wanted to wrap my arms around her to let her know this had nothing to do with you.
I know. And you know, even she also said that he, what was it that, oh, it was shocking to her that instead of, you never hear from Alex be compelled to like, I hope you guys are out there trying to find who killed Maggie and Paul, or my wife and son, because I need to know what happened. This is not okay. I will be here. Here's Anthony after the boating accident, who refuses to leave the freaking scene of the crime. And then you've got Alex,
get him to it,
who's like playing with his phone, reading text messages. Yeah.
Family off at the knees. And then, yeah. And then here's
this big difference.
Yeah. I mean,
and instead of being upset like that, he says, oh, well, something along the lines of, if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to make sure I get Paul's name cleared. Oh, well, that's great. That's just your family's reputation. What about you find who killed them?
What I found, just breaking
that would be
down, basically on the topic that we're talking about, was what he didn't do. Okay. Everything is smoke and mirrors.
Speaks volumes. Yeah.
With Murdaugh. Let's just call it like it is. It's smoke and mirrors. He's always playing somebody. He's always manipulating. So yeah, he puts out this, if you have any evidence, or if you know what happened, here's this X amount of dollars.
But it's got an expiration date. I've never heard of that before. I don't know if it's normal.
It was like a list of, what should I do if you kill somebody and you don't want to get caught? Okay, put out a reward. Check.
But make sure it ends in a couple months.
Yeah, wouldn't you? I would go to my grave waiting for someone to come forward. It would
never expire until you found out who killed your wife and child.
My death would expire, but that reward would never. I would put it in my will. If someone came out 50 years after I died, my great, great, great grandchildren better pay this person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no closure to that, but the truth. And he puts a timestamp on it. What? And then the one thing I've noticed about Alec, and if anybody's paying attention, and I'm going to go really deep into this as we keep talking, is part of his nature, and his lying nature, is to expose himself through random conversation, saying things that he doesn't necessarily need to say, but he says.
The Freudian slips, and
letting some of it off of his chest, and that mental psychopathy in his head.
Yeah.
So he's not so bad. So when he says to, first of all, after the murders, to go stay with the family, Maggie's family, talk about hiding in plain sight. That's putting up a reward. What man would murder his wife and son and then go stay with his wife's family? He just kept doing these things to just completely throw up smoke and mirrors, and then says to the family, no, whoever did this planned it for a long time.
He sure did, didn't you, Alex?
So here's two things. Why do you feel that? What did you see that made
you think that?
Planning, and why the hell would you say it?
Yeah. There's nothing that would have indicated to anybody that this was like something anybody planned for a very long time. Like, you're absolutely right. There's no relevance. It's more of a telling on himself.
It's a telling on himself. And he did it so many times throughout what we saw as the trial. I'm sure he did it at other points, but what we saw was just the trial publicly. So,
yeah.
Countless times through the trial, he did it, if you were just paying attention. And here's my thing. Everybody keeps going, well, the timeline, and how could he do this? And how could he couldn't possibly do this, and he couldn't possibly get back and go, oh my God, he just did this. He didn't do it spur of the moment, people. He said it.
He planned it.
This planned it for a long time. He might
Absolutely.
not have known the exact day he was going to do it. I have no idea. And I'm not here to split hairs. All I'm saying is he knew he was going to do it. So he wasn't flying by the seat of his pants that whole night. And how the hell did he get the tools, get this, get the jacket, get the raincoat, the tarp, whatever the heck it was, do all of this just because he lost his mind in a 7,000 opioid pill addiction moment? No, he
Yeah.
said it. He
Yeah.
said it.
I
Whoever
know.
did this planned it for a long time. He knew
Yeah.
what he was going to do. And that's why he almost did it flawlessly, because he knew he was
Yep.
ready. So
And I actually think some of the slip ups he made, you can see to some degree that he did actually put some thought in and was careful with some things. But with some of the stuff, I'm surprised he even put that much thought, because I don't really think in the past he ever really had to worry about getting caught, because his buddies were just supposed to, like, for the most part, botch the investigation and let it fall apart and be like, we don't know who did it.
yeah,
And it's interesting that in the trial, then the defense was like, well, Sled did a terrible job. Yeah, Sled did a terrible job because Alex has buddies in Sled that were
necessarily, they had their faults. They had their faults. Let's give them their,
trying to do a terrible job. So, but Alex wouldn't.
They're starting their investigation on a lie. So here it is. They blame Sled. At the same time, he's already known he's lied to Sled. He's completely thrown the investigation off, which I think, again, this man is a manipulator.
Oh, a master.
People, he's educated, and he knows the court system. He knows what to say, when to say, and who to say it to. And he's gotten away with it for over a decade because he's good at it. He's not suddenly going to get it wrong. This is a person that thinks, it probably still does, that he is the smartest man in the room.
Oh, yeah.
He's manipulating the entire thing, going all down to making a point. Again, he always, and this is where it goes back to him always stating the facts, even though he's trying to lie, but he's giving it to you anyway. For him to say, I didn't want to touch Paul's phone, but it just kind of popped out. But I wasn't going to touch it because I didn't want to.
Of his back pocket.
He's going to be so careful about the crime scene, and it means so much to him not to mess up the crime scene because that's his family down there, that I'm going to lie to you about not being there. A bullshit. You can't have it both ways. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth, the bottom. You can't. And that's him manipulate. That's where he's telling you the truth in plain sight. You just have to listen. He's saying it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But that's his psychopathy. He truly believes he's the smartest person in the room. He's been able to lie his way through millions of dollars to the people that trust him the most. Get this good overnight.
Yeah, I mean, who's able to go get a loan from the bank when they're $600,000 overdrawn? I can't even get a loan from the bank and I have a positive account.
That's having inside help, which I truly believe there is still a possibility. I'm not going to throw out a bunch of theories because there's theories or theories, but it's definitely a possibility he has had help with the smaller details, hiding the weapons, that kind of thing. I'm pretty much convinced that he was the shooter for both, because I believe that he was trying to make it look like he didn't.
Absolutely.
Do it.
It was supposed to be two. He wanted it to look like two people.
Dude, that's brilliant using two. That is sick brilliance, because it throws it off. Who does that? Who? If you're trying to manipulate a well thought out murder, that's what you do. And he's an attorney. He knows he's going to be the first person looked at. He knows he's going to have an alibi, and he knows he's going to have to throw the investigation off. He is very smart.
Yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
not because he has an opioid addiction, people. That's not the reason. That's
No, he's actually far more smart than I even gave him credit for. Until I saw him testify, I did not understand how he was able to get away with as much as he did. But when I saw him on the stand and I saw him work his way through every single little hole, I mean, he's very cunning. He knows exactly what to do. And I actually was very concerned because he did do a pretty decent job up there.
yeah, but
But I
this
also
is the first
remember
time he
being
was
like,
throwing out those lies like this on the stand for a case where he was potentially the murderer of his wife and son. Usually he's
mhm,
doing this stuff on the fly with his clients that just trust him. So he doesn't have a whole bunch to prove there. They just believe him. And then you have
and then
family.
they're afraid to question him.
Yeah. And then you have family and peers and law partners that have no reason to doubt him. So when he was doing all the lies, you have to keep it in perspective. He didn't have the pressure on him. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He had already convinced him. He'd already convinced people he was good and kind and doing right by the law and right by the world and right by them and right by their family and right by their friendship and right by their clients and right by their law partners. So there was no doubt. So it was easy to take him for his word. What we saw was him doing it with a massive amount of doubt around him. And him being the smartest man in the room,
True.
thought he could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Thought he could do it. He had decades of experience. He thought it through, and he wasn't going to get caught. He thought he went through it up, down, forwards, and backwards, and he thought of every scenario, and he truly thought he was going to get away with it until the video.
Oh, that video was so important.
Can't plan for everything, people, until that video. And even when it came out, he still denied because, as his own words say, and he said it in the courtroom, oh, the tangle webs we weave. Once I start to lie, I have to continue to lie. He said it again. And
Yep.
people think, oh, but it was this drug addiction. And I'm going,
No.
that's the time you think he's telling you the truth? His 7,000 pill a day drug addiction? That's the part you think is true? He's still throwing out smoke and mirrors. Do I think he's
Absolutely.
using a shit ton of pills? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Selling them. He was also selling them.
Yeah. I mean, that was
I
beyond
can't prove it
personal
right
use.
now, but take this podcast and rewind it later. It will be true.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, did you see what I like? This is the stuff I saw. And I'm thinking, everybody makes him out to be this like pathological, lying, psychopathic murderer, but yet they take some of what he said as to some truth. They're still saying all the stuff that he was saying about paranoia and his drug addiction is a Google research. He almost took it verbatim.
Yeah.
He knew, goes back, he is a trial attorney. He knows what to say, how to say, who to say it to. It's a quick Google search.
As
Almost
though killing your wife
verbatim
and child wouldn't make you
that
paranoid
he
too.
had
Only drugs.
irrational suspicion or mistrust of other people. Didn't he say that was one of his trigger points? Verbatim, people. Research. It was a Google search.
Yeah.
It's as if someone or something is out to get them. Can't say anything in front of that guy, David. I have pills that are out to get me. Oh my God. He knew what to say. And why did he do this? Because so many people have family members with opioid addictions.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge sympathy.
With at least one person on that jury, one person that has a family member, a friend, someone close to them, a coworker that talks about their family member going through all this. He was trying to throw out that relatability.
Absolutely.
Believed him. He was manipulating even the awful, awful, horrible effects of opioid addiction because he's that deceptive and disgusting.
Yeah.
To get someone to believe him.
Absolutely.
That's just my opinion, and I keep talking. Throw in you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was listening to these body language experts too, and they were talking about how when he was up on the stand, giving them like his little grains of truth, that, you know, they were saying that that's what you do to make the person feel like, oh, here's a thread of something, of honesty, that now you're supposed to blanket trust me again, because I gave you, like, this was a gift I gave you, a little grain of truth, and now you're supposed to forget everything else. They have like a term for it. I have to watch it again. They were really interesting on breaking down a lot of that stuff. But
he gave enough truth to convince
yeah,
himself he was really telling the truth. And
he filled in the big holes of his story at the last minute. Like,
by making a bunch of bigger holes, because
yeah,
when you think you're the smartest person in the room,
mm-hmm.
you think you have everybody convinced. But when he had such a 100% track record, and I'll say 100% because I haven't heard anybody come forward say, I fired him as an attorney because I didn't believe him. I haven't heard anybody come forward to say, I didn't believe him yet.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Have you? 100% track record over how many years? That
And
gives someone
stealing from
a
people.
lot of confidence to go in there.
Oh, absolutely.
And do what he said. And
yeah.
even when, and there was a juror that, you know, was interviewed and was saying, and I found this really, really insightful that he saw this, because this is also a characteristic of a liar, that he didn't cry when he,
I love that part. Yeah.
the snot coming out of his face. I never saw him collapse over the loss of the love of his life, the son he adored, this beautiful family. He never cried over finding somebody. How could someone take this family away from me? But he did do it to try to convince that he didn't do it. But what you can't do is you can't fake true sadness. And he did not cry. He snotted, he wiped, he was dramatic. It was all these things, but he didn't shed a tear.
Nope.
And if you watch him in his,
and the juror said he was close enough.
Close enough. He said, I saw the whites of his eyes. Like, paraphrasing, I'm not really sure if he said that, but basically he said, I saw his eyes. There was not a tear. If you go and look at his interviews, I could right now pretend like I'm crying my ass off, but I'm not going to let a tear come. I can't, because I'm not that sad. Yep. I can't make a tear come. I can rub the hell out of my eyes, and I can shake, and I can turn away, and I can take a tissue, and I can make my voice crack. I could do all that. Yeah. But I can't cry. And he did not cry. Okay, so everybody watching, I'm not a psychopath. I was trying to enact. I was being dramatic for the moment. I'm not a weirdo, and my family is all alive.
She's very talented.
He rubbed his eyes. He rubbed them feverishly at times to just try to make it look awful, but he couldn't cry.
And let's not forget that a few of those lawyers that did testify also stated that they had seen Alex turn the tears on, or like the fake crying, very easily in court, and then walk outside and turn it right off. I think at least two lawyers, one of them I believe was Mark Tinsley. I think the other one was either Ronnie Crosby or Mark Ball. But
if you look at when the responders, the first responders were there, I believe, in case I'm wrong, I believe it was the first responders, not SLED came in after. But he's there at the crime scene, and he's distraught and emotional, and all this stuff's going on. And I believe another officer, agent, didn't know who they were at the time, comes up behind him. And in the midst of this horrible scene that you had no part of, and you're so dramatic and it's awful, and he turns around and sees this guy by, oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, back to, like,
yeah.
Come on, people. And you have the analysts, and I'm not going to say all the analysts that were on. First of all, I think Court TV is amazing, and thank you for being the streamer of all things Murdaugh for everybody in the world to see. You guys did a fabulous job. Kudos to all of you. But when I should say, but with that said, when they're having this different analysts coming on, and they're analyzing every little minute detail, I would say splitting hairs, because They're lawyers.
Yeah.
They're, you know, defense attorneys, prosecutors. They're all in legal world. You lose sight of us normal people, us average
Yeah.
folk, that there's a level of common sense that gets into play here. And if you're not splitting hairs over all the forensic stuff, if you just go to the common sense, just watch him, just listen to him. Yes, the financial stuff led to his character, which I do believe the defense let in. The judge wasn't necessarily going to do it, but the defense let it in during when they were questioning. He would have been guilty to me without it.
Yeah.
What he did regarding this entire murder made him guilty.
Totally.
That stuff was just, to me, icing on the cake and a little cherry on top. But that wouldn't have been what convinced me. And that's the hair splitting. This man was his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And everybody's trying to tear down the whole thing about would he have been convicted if they didn't know about all of the financial things? Well, he would have been if I was on the jury. What about you? What do you think of that? Did the financial stuff really end up, was that part of your decision making?
I think it was a really, it showed where his mind would be, and like, yeah, it's motive, right? I think it was hugely impactful because money and power makes people do crazy things. I mean, we've seen that, the Ghislaine Maxwell story. I mean, here's a woman, she reminded me a lot of Buster in some aspects of this. And I know a lot of people are sympathetic with Buster, and I'm not being sympathetic, but it made me think about, you know, why would you go on the stand if it seems pretty evident that I find it hard for you not to know that your dad most likely killed your mother and your brother. It's at the very least, he never thought to tell you that he was there 5 minutes before they died. That's hard to take in. Why would somebody do that? So I started thinking about Ghislaine Maxwell, and, you know, she grew up with money, power, social status, 3 very big things. And when you're faced at looking at the possibility of losing all that, you'll do some pretty desperate, very bad things in order to keep it. And as we know from seeing her story, it's exactly what she did. You know, her dad died. She said when they came to take all the money away, because he had done very bad things, he spent all of his employees' 401k, and then he unalived himself because of it, leaving her with, like, she said they were even taking away the silverware from their home. So she was desperate to keep that. And I look at Buster, and was he really doing it for his dad? I don't think so. Honestly, I think he was doing it. A murder charge on their family is a really bad stain to get past. There's a lot of things that people will let go of or forget over time. Financial stuff is somewhat accepted. Like, he doesn't even have problems being compared. He wants to compare himself to Bernie Madoff constantly. That's not a problem.
I going off of what you just said, the fact that he found it so easy to admit to financial,
let me tell you all the horrible financial things
like, yeah, he found it too easy to just admit to those. But I also think he was very easily, it's like, look over here, don't pay attention over here. I'm going to admit to all the.
He can't even say the words.
Know what I'm doing. He found it too easy. He
can't even say the words, I didn't kill them. He can't say kill. He could only say hurt. I did not hurt them.
Hurt?
Like, I mean, that's a lie too. You definitely hurt them. I'm sure you hurt their feelings before you most likely killed them. You hurt them. You annihilated them. But I thought of Ghislaine Maxwell a lot when thinking about Buster, because I think the motive was similar. I don't even think he did it to help his dad. I think he did it to help himself. Because if he could save his family's image a little bit more, like, yes, he
wanted to be his father. He wanted to be a successful, powerful.
But his father going to prison for not just the financial crimes, but for murder and that type of murder, I mean, it's a stain. It is a stain on their family legacy. I'm just going to be honest. The old South is old socialite stuff. Like, he might not get invited to some things, or some people may not want to be associated that might have still been associated with him had it just been the financial crimes.
Financial crimes, I believe that family would have found its way back.
Yeah, I think so too.
Even Alex
People forget that stuff.
Probably would have. He had enough people that really found it hard to be mad at him, even when they came on the stand. You could see their heart was broken. And I believe the psychopath of Alec actually believed, give it enough time, he could persuade them, and that friendship or that bond or whatever it was not going to ever practice love.
Hey, Bo.
He truly believed he could have fixed that. Just give it enough time. I got this. Yeah. But he couldn't come back from a murder. And that's what he did not want out there. He did not want a murder. He knew no one, besides for the weird people out there. And I'm going to call it like it is. If you think it's kind of cool and you want to associate with a murderer, you're weird.
Yeah.
He knew that was something you can't come back from. You cannot come back from that.
That's so true.
And I think that's what he was trying so desperately.
I know a lot of people go to prison for financial crimes. Like some famous people. I mean, look at the different people from like reality TV. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow's uncle went to prison for tax fraud, and he's out and everything is fine. You know, but yeah, when you look at this, Alex was never in danger of like, it wasn't about him going to prison for the rest of his life, because he was always going to go to prison for the rest of his life with his 99 financial crimes. It was going to keep him in prison forever. So this was never about trying to, like, anybody who's upset about he was convicted guilty based on circumstantial evidence. I want to know what these people are really unhappy about, because was it you didn't want this man to go to prison for the rest of his life? Because he was going to go no matter what. All that happened by him getting convicted based on circumstantial evidence is there was a stain mark put on him. It was a red letter. I mean, that's the biggest scarlet letter. Having the mark of murder. Like he was, I've been seeing people on Facebook. I've seen some people shockingly say that, it was a very sad day that he was convicted on circumstantial evidence. Why would anybody be so sad about that? Like, this man was going to prison for the rest of his life. All that happened to him was he had a stain mark put on his family legacy.
Here's my thing.
He wasn't ever going to be put to death.
Come back to reality here, people. Everybody thinks that you have to have a body, you have to have the murder weapon, you have to have all of these things to convict somebody. The fact is, you don't. And I want you, and I'm saying you, meaning anybody listening, certainly not you directly. I'm not talking about you directly. But if someone murdered your family member, someone you truly cared about, and they lied about being at the crime scene, and they were seen carrying out weapons, and that all this circumstantial evidence that you saw, would you say, let's not take him to trial? He might not have done it.
Yeah.
He lied about being there. I know he was there minutes before my loved one died, but it's just circumstantial. So let's just keep looking. Come on. Bring it back to reality. That circumstantial evidence is what you'd be pounding your fist on. You'd be yelling at attorneys. You'd be screaming it from the rooftops. I've got enough to convict somebody who murdered someone I love off of circumstantial evidence. And now, the armchair lawyer you are, how could he be convicted on circumstantial evidence? Well, you know what? What if it was someone you loved? Would you just let him go? What
if it was you and they were trying someone for your own death?
You can get convicted on nothing. But sometimes circumstantial evidence is more reliable than evidence.
Yeah.
People just stop watching TV, stop watching movies, start researching the law, start researching what really is circumstantial evidence and how many people get convicted of it and go to prison every day because the circumstantial evidence, when built up enough, which I believe in this case, it was ginormous amounts of circumstantial evidence, ends up telling the truth. And I'm so tired of hearing people say, but it was circumstantial evidence.
I'm tired of it too. It's so exhausting. And then even
go back
the reasonable
do something, but educate yourself, because that's bullshit.
I loved Creighton's analogy about the reasonable doubt. Like if you have here's a picture of the Mona Lisa, or like here's a sticky note with lines on it. If I tear off a piece of that, can you still tell it's an orange sticky note with lines on it?
That,
yeah,
I am just like this man. Okay, now, okay, you brought up Waters. I would like to shake that man's hand.
Oh, he's amazing.
I don't think anybody in this world that watched the closing arguments, will ever see the Mona Lisa differently again. It was
no,
a brilliant metaphor. And another thing I would like to, and tell me if you feel the same way, give him an enormous amount of kudos, because the patience he showed.
Yeah.
When he had Alec on the stand, when he was going through his testimony, and again, I'm going to go back to all of those analysts that were saying this is like an interview. Alec's controlling the room. He's just talking. He's being able to say what he wants to say. Do you have any idea the brilliance that it took to allow that? You think Alec controlled the room? Waters did.
I thought he did too. I thought he did an excellent job.
His head, and when you're dealing with that type of psychopathy, let him talk. They can't help themselves. Let him talk. He'll bury himself 10 times over. Do you honestly think the blue lights would have ever come into play if he wasn't allowed to just keep talking? When he leaned over the podium, was like, tell us more. Tell us more. I was like, go. You've got him. You've got him. You own this man on the stand. And the analysts are like, why were they doing an interview? It's dragging on too long. Knock that off. He had him. He took a man who had every person he knew convinced for over a decade how wonderful he was, and he was lying to their face. And in one testimony, Waters had him. That's brilliant. And
it's absolutely brilliant.
If he wasn't good enough to just let him talk, when he paused, there is no louder sound of silence when you have a psychopath like that.
Yep.
You go silent like this.
Just let them tell about themselves.
Can't help it. When you're negotiating, and there's negotiators out, financial, whatever. When you're negotiating, someone will know what I'm talking about. If you've researched it, if you've done your research, the best move you can make in negotiation.
And
let them talk. Time he went silent, walked away, didn't say anything. Did you get water? Maybe got a little mint. Alec couldn't help himself. He had to talk. He had him like on a collar, just directing everything. He was brilliant. And all the analysts couldn't see what he was doing. It's dragged out.
I actually stopped watching a lot of the analysts because I got really frustrated with them. A lot of them had bad information. I heard many of them say things that weren't correct about like details about the case itself. And I felt like a lot of times I'm like, are we even watching the same thing? And, you know, you end up sounding like a conspiracy theorist if you're involved in this case.
I believe in them because they've been proven right over and over lately.
It really is kind of that way in this case, because when we've been doing this for so long, and like we kept getting to points where it's like, no way could that be possible. That's too crazy. And then it was with so many things. I don't even doubt that he has pull with some of these commentators. I wouldn't even doubt that. Like Dick Harpootlian's wife just got, what's the word for it? She was given an ambassadorship. She was just awarded an ambassadorship to like Slovakia, I believe. Oh. And here he is in this horrible court case at the moment. You know, let's give his family an award.
You always wonder. You don't fire the people you're trying to keep quiet. You promote them.
Yeah,
but she might be a wonderful woman. So by no means are we saying there's any.
I know. That's true. No harm against her. It was a little frustrating. It was bad timing.
To have an opinion,
but true.
There's no proof of any of that. She could be wonderful and well worthy of this position.
True.
Stupid Human Tricks tells us all the time. You gotta look into everything.
I
think that's basically what I'm hearing from you, Kelly. That it's just
It's not too far to doubt that he would have connections. I do think he was able to control aspects of the press for a long time in South Carolina. There's a reason nobody wanted to write about these things and people just wanted to let it die.
Yeah.
I mean, when all these things happened, when Maggie and Paul were killed, it was in the main news for like a bleep, and then it went silent. It wasn't it. It was just Mandy who kept she really kept chomping on it. And eventually,
what I've noticed is when something should be in the news and it's not,
there's a reason.
start asking questions. It's not because it's not a big deal.
And even with the roadside accident, they got excited for a half a minute, and then they all went quiet again. And then the Saturday, I didn't even feel like the news really fully committed until the charges dropped on the murders of Maggie and Paul. Then they all started getting committed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and sometimes, like,
I mean, the mainstream media.
Sometimes no one's connecting it. There has to be that moment where people go, wait a minute. Now, here's what I found completely baffling, and it seemed to just be widely accepted. Gloria Falls going up the steps and basically completely backwards as if she's passed out. Oh, stroke, whatever. You fall on the steps, you don't go backwards like that. Like, for her,
she falls up the stairs
and fall. And if you've seen any different shows that are out there, there's people who would testify for what they saw, what they didn't, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But just the way she fell, I thought was odd. She's backwards. The 911 call says she fell going up the steps. So she's going up but falls backwards. That whole thing is weird. But let's go a little bit deeper. They're asked, the 911 operator asks, is she talking? Is she talking? Can you talk to her? And the response was, no, she's just gurgling. She's not talking. And the family, once she was at the hospital, they never heard her voice again. So she's she's at where she was, and I'm going to call it out, murdered. She's not talking. She's gurgling. Whatever head trauma, I don't know the whole entire case. Not talking at all. Gets taken away. Never speaks again at the hospital. But she happens to be able, and this is Alex's own words, tell him, I tripped over the dogs.
Yeah, that comes out clearly.
Hear that? Anybody else? No one can say I was there with him when she said it. Everybody's saying she couldn't speak. But then for 1 second, with Alec and nobody else around, I could say a whole sentence. And then again, I can't talk anymore.
That doesn't work that way.
This is the common sense where I'm like, think.
Oh, and don't forget, the Judge Newman said this was a CSC or a common sense crime, wasn't it? Is that what he called it? A CSC?
Common sense.
Common sense. And, I have to say, with the Gloria thing, the rumor for the longest time, because as I told you, I talked to a lot of locals, some of the ones that I knew that knew the family. The word on the street for years was Timmy did it. And Timmy is the alter ego name for Paul. When Paul would drink, his eyes would shift. He acted very different, could get very violent. And so they actually called him a whole other name. They called him Timmy. And the rumors for years was that Timmy did it. But, I didn't know. I liked the Netflix thing because there were some things I didn't know. It's the first thing I've seen that there were things I didn't know. And the big thing was the kids were saying how close Paul was to her. And so not only they were like, there's no way he could have done it. And for the first time, I thought maybe he didn't. And, apparently
one person that said Paul wasn't even there.
Yeah. And apparently if this woman was the closest thing to a real true family member that cared about him, that really mothered him, and then he maybe knows
him.
And then maybe what if he finds out that we don't know if Alex or somebody did it, but if it was somebody in his family that was responsible for the one person that he felt loved by dying, that could have been enough reason for him to become a raging drunk. That was before the boat accident. One of my friends brought that up to me and I was like, I never thought about it like that. Like maybe that is part of what broke Paul.
I think Paul was broken well before that. And that's
Yeah.
a whole different podcast. But yeah, Paul,
It could have easily contributed.
Paul had demons before he
Yeah.
died. And I'll leave it at
Yeah.
that until I can say otherwise with other
Talk
than
more.
my gut instinct telling me it's true.
Well, I mean, yeah, there were stories I think of like there was like a mother, I think, in our group that told us that her kid used to play with Paul and like they didn't want their kid to play with Paul anymore because Paul could get a little aggressive, too aggressive. And this was like when they were on the playground age.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Paul was acting out because of what was happening to him at home at a very young age. And
Yeah.
And you're watching your family, and I believe he knew a lot of what he was a little detective. I think he knew a lot of his father's not good and due to the name and just the way they're raised and that don't show anything but everything's wonderful, that would torment anybody.
Yeah.
And that will torment anybody that wasn't involved in anything bad. Constantly keeping your family secrets. You're only human, for God's sakes. You know, he might have been the only one in that family that might have maybe survived it all had the boat crash not happened and actually become a decent person. Because from what I'm seeing and from what I'm learning and from everything I've heard from the people I've talked to, it's bad. You know, he at least had an emotion. He at least somehow the turmoil was in him and he showed some kind of emotion. He had a good side and a bad side. Where I see some of the other family members and they've got
nothing. Nothing. Yeah.
And that to me,
yeah.
That's where that bloodline is.
Or some of the family members smirking during like really awkward moments.
Yeah, just that ability to have a normal human emotion and reaction that is, it's either in you and it's really bad if it's not in you, because if it's not in you, there's a lot of things you're capable of. And that's,
oh yeah,
that's really,
mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up Waters, because I think he was brilliant. Everybody could say what they want to say about him. If he walked past me today, I'd probably jump up and down and give him.
I want to go see his band play.
Jump up and down and give him a round of applause. I believe he played it perfectly.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Times where, I don't know, closing ceremony, closing statements, it got dragged out, but and this is where, like, listening to the analysts talk, there's this massive amount of information that the jury's getting and they're not allowed to take notes. How in the world are they going to go back and deliberate on this? So Waters takes his time to do a full recap because these jurors have no information. He doesn't know what they think at that moment. He's got to put his best case forward. No, he left it all on the table. So they're like, oh my God, they have no notebooks. This is terrible. How can they do this? Oh man, the closing statement's too long. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Pick one. You can't complain about both sides, people. Sometimes these analysts are a little too close to the
I know.
Close to home that they don't get. There's a level of humanity.
Yeah, they really were disconnected
from common sense that you're so used to defending that you forget we still have common sense. We're not attorneys. We're not defense attorneys. We're not prosecutors. We don't have legal backgrounds. We have common sense. And let us think. Stop thinking the jury wasn't going to get it. You're too close to home. You forgot. We can think.
Yep. Another moment that I really enjoyed, it almost seemed so perfect that it was written that way almost, but there was a point where Harpootlian was doing a reenactment with a gun, and he was completely disrespectful in the way that he carried it. You're never supposed to point a gun at anyone. Ever.
You handle a gun as if it's loaded, cocked, ready to go.
And he treated it like it was a joke. He was joking around, laughing, like, look at me, I'm like the penguin. He acted like he was like the penguin in the Batman movie. And then he pointed it at the prosecution and said, tempting, isn't it? That was like, oh
No
my God, I
denying
can't
that.
believe anybody would behave like that at all, much less on the world stage. So Dick is a state senator. Okay. He has power. So even thinking about this man trying things in court, that's intimidation alone that he's a state senator. I don't even know how that's okay at times, but
Yeah. Okay.
then you go
Yeah.
into that towards the very, very end. Alan Wilson, the Attorney General of the state of South Carolina, this is his prosecution team. He's been there the whole time, but he actually hasn't done any of the questioning himself. He comes in at the very end and he's doing a reenactment with the gun. And there you see how a person is supposed to be using a gun, being responsible, treating everyone there with respect. He's showing respect with the gun. He asks the person that he's doing the demonstration with, do I have your permission to point this at you? I know you've already given it to me, but do I have your permission? Yes, of course. It was such an interesting juxtaposition to see one person behaving badly, another person to behaving so perfectly and respectfully and showing everyone what respect looks like. And then also the juxtaposition of power, the state senator and one of the few people above him, the attorney general. It was such an interesting, like, oh man,
I almost
power position.
It's a power position, but for anybody out there who owns guns, handles guns, trust me, I have zero issue. I probably shouldn't say, but I have a whole gun room. I'm an avid shooter.
I have a gun, and I take it very
Yes,
seriously how people use and
range and all the way to a crossbow. I believe in weaponry. I love it. Here's my thing. You have
responsible ownership is important.
responsible ownership, locking it up, all that stuff, but you
And handling.
respect the weapon.
Mm-hmm.
That is a weapon. I don't care if I don't have it. I don't even have a magazine in it. I've cleared it. I've actually looked at, while you're cleaning your gun and you're lining up, it's part of the cleaning process. You're putting things back together. Even a gun that's not even fully put back together, I don't point. It's a gun. It's a weapon.
It's a rule.
You have to respect. If you don't respect that, you shouldn't hold one. You shouldn't.
Absolutely. And you should never be joking around.
Never.
With a weapon like that. It was just so disgusting and distasteful. But I thought the juxtaposition of those two, the imagery of that was like, I don't even know if he planned it this way, but my goodness, that is a really interesting image.
Was questioning all these things about hogs and during the day and during the night, would you be on a cart without a gun? Or it's almost, I was like, he's in the low country. Is this the only man that doesn't own a gun? He almost, either he was dumbing himself down or he truly didn't know, because that was the only thing. And by no means am I making an excuse, but it's the only way I could say that horrible display of respect for humanity and a weapon for what he did is only,
and making it a joking matter,
because
this is a murder trial. This is not something you joke about.
No, no. Or
like the way he's like being
the wind out of the sails of the prosecution and make people laugh. Who knows? But
it was gross,
really irresponsible. As a gun owner, I took offense to that.
It really turned my stomach. It was just absolutely gross and disrespectful.
Yeah.
We're at a murder trial. This should be taken seriously. It's not a clown show.
No. And since we're talking about Harpootlian, I really don't like when people sling mud while they're playing in the mud. I don't know how else to explain it. When he's talking about all the dysfunction and the inappropriateness and the, idiocracy of SLED in their investigation, he never says, but my client's okay for lying and giving you a completely wrong way to, like, squirrel,
and giving you red herrings.
Don't look over there. He lied about the investigation from the beginning, and you're defending that, but you're going to ream SLED and agents and officers by name for their investigation work, the investigation your client manipulated?
Yeah.
Now I get it. He's a defense attorney and he's going to sling whatever he's going to sling, and he's trying to get something to stick to the wall, and that's his job. But you're calling people out by name while your client set those wheels in motion. I have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I do too.
The investigation and crime scene investigation is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And they were doing it a scene of carnage. Mistakes were made. Yes, there were. I want to believe in my heart none of them were made with intention. Do they need to tighten up the rings over there at SLED and maybe put everybody through a course of, how to really
Not
investigate a crime scene?
be
Maybe
manipulated.
a refresher. But if I would say one thing, now's the time. Now's the time. SLED did do a beautiful job. I believe they were linked with the FBI, very, very, very high agencies that helped them. I even think Secret Service, maybe, I don't know. But there was a lot of people way above just a murder in the Lowcountry that were involved in this case. And that's wonderful. And they came out on top, and that's great. But how you really take this moment where you let South Carolina shine because they did the right thing, and the people did the right thing, and they did find someone of incredible historic power and still did the right thing fearlessly. I think agencies need to go into their own network and check themselves equally as fearlessly. Be fearless. Check yourself. Go back through. Take this moment where you're allowing South Carolina to shine. Clean up your act so this doesn't get said again. You are good people. Yeah. Clean up your act. Clean house. Do what you've got to do. But you have a moment. You have a moment where you can expand on this. Use it to your advantage. Clean it up.
I hope they do take that opportunity, because this is the right time to do it. Alan Wilson has just set the stage of, that was a big win for the state. I mean, with his speech last night, I think he could have probably set his intentions to run for governor with a win like that.
If there isn't anything dark that starts to come of this, if he's not in the process of cleaning it, because they're going to look.
Yeah.
People are looking. They're going to crack that foundation and leaks are going to start. Everybody will be part of a cover up if you are a criminal mind, but no one goes down alone. Trust me. People are going to start talking if they put their backs against the wall. And if Murdaugh so elegantly showed us, coming clean at the 11th hour on the stand isn't going to work. No one's going to fall for it. You're going to come clean. Now's the time. And if you're going to clean up your act, now's the time.
I mean, yeah, he just never thought he was going to. I think he's one of those people. Somebody told me this one time. It's not a lie if you believe it. And maybe he even believes some of his own lies. He just really, truly believed he could get away with anything he wanted to. Yeah. Like, really, even up until the end.
He had
the very, very end.
The smartest man in the world.
And I wasn't sure either. I'm just going to be honest. I got to a point where I said, the prosecution did as good as I feel like somebody could have done, to where I'm left feeling, I feel fulfilled. I feel completely fulfilled. They have met my expectations. They've gone above and beyond. I'm good. I don't think there's much more they could have done. And at that point, I was like, everybody's asking you, like, what do you think is going to happen? Did I feel like I had enough faith in this area where the Murdaughs have been able to buy verdicts for hundreds of years? No.
And
I know we're in a bad position. I know we're in a thing where everything has been uncovered. But do I think it's like still has the possibility to happen again? Absolutely, I do.
That's where I think a lot of locals and the people that I know there, and the people that do know the history there in South Carolina and Hampton and the Murdaughs, that's where I think that doubt came in. Not that it was common sense that was going to convict this man, but there has been so much. There's a bloodline of fear. There's a bloodline of success. And there's a bloodline of fear, and that bloodline of fear, you have no idea on that jury who has been affected by this family, who got out of a DUI, who got out of a case, who didn't go to jail because someone was represented, who do they buy drugs from? You know, you just don't know that.
Who was involved in their money laundering, possibly.
Yeah, so you just don't know. And then here he is on trial, and you just don't know if there's someone on that jury that's going to be affected, because you've witnessed and watched the weight of that fear control that community for decades. I think there was reasonable understanding that that people just thought, is it really going to happen? It never happens. Is it? Really?
And what if they go against them and then they end up in power again and then you get hurt? I think it's incredibly telling of how much power they had. If you listen to Anthony Cook the night of the boat accident, and he is just heartbroken and angry and screaming, "They're Murdaughs. Nothing's going to happen to them." I mean, that says so much.
It was just known.
And even that night, they were already setting it up to blame it on the other kid.
Even though he never said it, but he had his little badge accidentally hanging out. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah.
Nope. Common sense, people. Common sense.
I can't fault the locals at all for being, I mean, I'm scared for them. If I had still lived in South Carolina, I probably wouldn't be here having this conversation with you right now.
Yeah. Yeah.